All right. Can folks hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah? Okay,
Yes.
amazing. So yeah, really great to see everybody again today on this cool November evening. I think it's the second day now with snow on the ground, which is pretty exciting. I think last winter, maybe we were worried if we would get any snow by Christmas. So I think my bets are that we're going to have a snowy Christmas. So really glad to have the lovely Amina as our special guest today. Amina is one of the most lovely ladies I've met actually in this industry. Yeah, she's just such a warm heart, and I'm really excited to hear and to see all the great things that she and her community are doing in Mount Dennis, which is just a ways away from my neighborhood in Little Jamaica. Amina actually and I used to be almost could have been neighbors, but now she's in Hamilton. But we're still, I think, neighbors at heart. So, oopsie-doopsie. Yeah, so today's session is going to go just like all the other sessions. We'll begin with my period of presentation, and then we're going to go to Amina's, and then we're going to close off with some questions and answers. When Amina is doing her presentation, feel free to drop messages in the chat in case you're worried that you might maybe forget your question, but we prefer the questions to be held at the end. And so that's the way we'll be doing that. And so let's go off actually with starting with our land acknowledgement. So acknowledging that the city planning, we are based in the city of Toronto, which is traditional territories of the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and now home to many First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people. Land in Toronto, where we do most of our work, is covered by Treaty 13 and the Suburbs of the Credit with First Nation. And we also acknowledge that this land is home to many people, Indigenous as well as settlers, and those who came here involuntarily through the transatlantic slave trade and slavery. So as we do work with regards to community-led planning, it's really important that we consider all the ways that different communities have been marginalized or excluded in planning processes. At city planning, one of our primary topics is around the topic of displacement, and maybe to bring it even to an event that we had today. We know that Indigenous communities were the first to be displaced from their land. Black communities more likely to rent and therefore more likely to be displaced. But myself and some of the mentees from the mentorship program went to utilize annual trends breakfast this morning, and it was really shocking to hear that only 1% of housing in Toronto is affordable to households in the bottom 20% of incomes. 1%. So yeah, so there's we're really dealing with a great crisis of displacement and also of various marginalized communities being excluded and not really, frankly, thought enough about in terms of how our neighborhoods grow and develop. All right, so I'm going to go into my presentation. Okay. All right. So as usual, I'm going to go through beginning with a summary of the objectives of the program. For those who haven't been in one of these before, also, of course, it's always good to remind and to bring it up. And I hope each time I bring it up, new thoughts come to mind around the importance of these objectives and the key takeaways I'm summarizing from the previous sessions. So the objectives, there really are two of them. So broadening knowledge about community-led planning. What is the impact that communities have when they engage in shaping their neighborhoods? And then also deepening knowledge on how to achieve material improvements for community well-being through community-led planning, right? Want to be able to achieve as much as we can with the few resources that we have. And the goal also of broadening knowledge about community-led planning is that hopefully there will also be more resources because people will realize, oh wow, this is really important and impactful. I should actually invest in this. So to that front, really grateful for the support of the United Way as a funder of this series. So community-led planning is part of a broader system of equitable land use planning. And so this is where we have local, nonprofits, labor, and private sector working alongside government at the same table, working and making decisions together. You're having shared governance, so community is not just consulted, but actually is part of the decision-making process in defining the scope of a project. I think, for example, Victor Willis gave some really great storytelling about the great work that he's done. And so in actually being able to set direction around the Parkdale plan and also, recommending different policies, that's a way in terms of being able to inform how cities are developed. We have collaborative and values-based goals, transparent reporting, and then tying funding to policies with measurable outcomes. So equitable land use planning, this concept really does come from the United States. A lot of actually really great ideas in terms of how to better plan do come from the United States. And the reason why I bring this up is, the idea of including labor in the planning process for equitable land use planning does come from the United States. They had their Department of Housing and Urban Development noted that the inclusion of labor is really important to helping ensure that the development and investment into neighborhoods helps generate jobs for workers. And when we think about community-led planning, I've mentioned Victor Willis just now, but also the Toronto Community Benefits Network is another really great example of an organization that is investing for more equitable outcomes in terms of jobs for folks through the planning process. And we know already that private sector is already very well represented in the planning process, right? Constantly we're having a lot of rights being eroded in order to prioritize the private sector. And of course, we have government is the final decision maker, right? So local nonprofits and labor are parts of the puzzle that are currently only able to contribute a small component of the amount of labor and authority within the planning process. And the hope is that we actually see a process where there's more equal power sharing and the local community is actually able to have their voices heard. And so through community-led planning, where community is able to actually generate their own vision and put together their own plan and bring it to the table and collaborate with government, with labor and private sector, we get more equitable outcomes. The review of session 1. We had a really great discussion around what are the contexts and the needs for community-led planning. And so one of the key takeaways that I will share with you is the difference you see between what happens from a human rights-based engagement versus a traditional engagement. So on the left, you have the map from the Housing in Focus study that we did, where we engaged people in their, church basements and community centers around what we were able to look like if housing was a human right. And on the right is a traditional city-led planning process, which you more often will find the average person engaging is as the City of Toronto described it, a white male homeowner over the age of 55. So it's those who are not as likely to actually need improved access for affordable housing because, as I noted, they're homeowners. On the left, it was people who are low income or on limited income. And so, human rights-based engagement through our exploration through Housing in Focus, we found that folks are really keen to actually demarcate community ownership of housing. And this is just one example in the Danforth, Maine neighborhood, but consistently across all neighborhoods. This was in Weston, in Golden Mile, in Etobicoke Lakeshore. Those maps also demarcated where they would like to see co-op housing. And co-op housing, back in 2018, no one was talking about community land trusts. So I'm sure if I was to do this exercise again in communities, we would also be seeing support for community land trusts. And so why is it important? Well, we know that a lot of neighborhoods are seeing a lot of displacement. This is an example of an area of concern in Mississauga, where you have the Ontario line along there. There's plans for great amounts of density, and those are also the same neighborhoods where you have higher densities of visible minority renters, so they're at great risk of then therefore being displaced without, when there is not affordable housing policies in place to create new supply as well as protect their tenure in existing units. As we know also, the province of Ontario with Bill 60 is looking to reduce protections for tenants, so that risk actually just further worsens with such policy. And so, everybody is involved in gearing for equitable development, from nonprofits to media to government to business associations. Everybody has a role to play. So in this foundation of land use planning and why it matters, so some key takeaways from Robert's presentation, Robert, a planner at Gladkey Planning Associates, is that the private sector is ambitious in the asks and makes of government, and community can be too. And also planning is politics, meaning that your awareness of the local context and building relationships and telling the story is actually really impactful in terms of being able to win hearts and gain support for the outcomes that you're working towards. And also you had a really great diagram that's on the right showing the different levels of policies that help guide the different type of development that you can see in a neighborhood or on a particular site. So session 2, we went over this tool here, which was a bunch of links for the City of Mississauga and City of Toronto, development applications, and then also different lists to get on, the planning cities that are active in the neighborhood, getting on to be aware of who are the contacts of the studies that you're looking on, engaging on, or projects. And so I hope folks have taken some time to identify who their key contacts are for the work that you're doing. This is really about human relationships at the end of the day. And so, don't be afraid to send an email or give a call. I've always found every time I've made a call or sent an email, I've gotten a response. It might take a reminder or two at sometimes, but oftentimes the first contact would generate a response. And this is from also my private as well as my city planning email address. Next slide. And so we went over motivations and strategies. So counselors are looking for what are the visible wins. They wanted to also reduce risks, right? So you have helping to position them as a champion will encourage them to champion you because they'll be able to then use that to support their local residents to vote for them and keep them in their position. They move by knowing that community is on board. Local city planner, they want conformity with their task plan and the work being anchored in city policy. Developers are looking for certainty in speed and development, and then moved by solution-oriented trades, and local associations of various types are looking for to protect their members' interests and want clear roles and responsibilities. So if you're going to be going to, for example, build a coalition or build a partnership, having clarity around what you're asking of them to do and what you're offering them as a part of the collaboration. So how can you also help them advance their objectives as part of your collaboration? So some key takeaways from Aurella's presentation was to use humor and charm while being clear about community needs. So Aurella is a community leader who wears various hats. So she is a member of the Build a Better Bloor-Dufferin neighborhood group. She's also part of the Dufferin Grove Park group, as well as a board member of the Cultural Spaces Land Trust. And she's done incredible work. And so she's used humor and charm to help to communicate community asks. And also being clear around what are the repercussions. So, if, we're looking to secure affordable housing, or we're looking for a meaningful commitment from you around adding more units of affordable housing, and if you don't do that, what are we going to be doing as a community? So Aral is very straight up, right? You might have seen, for example, she's hosted different actions with, puppets in front of Dufferin Grove Mall, so the developer being aware of what the follow-up on their, as part of the negotiation. So she also shared that small groups of people who understand and maneuver process effectively can achieve a lot, right? So if you're feeling that, well, it's just one or two of us who are doing this, don't feel dissuaded. You can actually achieve quite a lot with your small group. Arella also did have a really great mailing list, so building an audience is really important as well. Being determined and persistent and finding what the opposed teams benefit in order to groundwork on a win-win solution is also a key strategy, right? So oftentimes we're working with developers or the city or different type of players, so they need to win as well as your group. Session 3, we went through this tool here that looked at what are the different types of considerations and timelines based on what you're looking to achieve in your project. And then we had a wonderful presentation from Victor, lots of learnings from him. So, understanding the journey that Park's been on in order to achieve its objectives, Victor being the former executive director of Park, the Parkdale Activity Recreation Center in Parkdale. And so, he walked us through Bread and Butter, which was a report that they did around 2012 or so, and how that helped to illuminate for them the role of local planning. And then they went forward and they did advancements to build the Parkdale Neighborhood Land Trust. They also went and pushed for local policies to be changed. Parkdale is very much the reason why we have, for example, the multi-unit residential acquisition program. They also did a lot of really great program work through their Parkdale plan around economic development and shared collaboration. And so, again, lots can be achieved by community identifying its vision for local development. So they've increased nonprofit-owned affordable housing and also increased density in affordable housing projects that are being led by the city. So I think it's a really great and inspiring example of what can be achieved. So session 4, lessons from the field, community-led planning and action. So we had Emily from the Association of Neighborhood and Housing Developers. She did a really excellent job of sharing about the great work that they're doing over in New York. I was really, really impressed to hear. It's the first time I've actually heard Emily's presentation, Emily being the Director of Organizing and Advocacy at the association. And so some of my key takeaways, and I'm going to ask folks in the group if you can share what your key takeaways are. It's always great to hear what folks take away from these sessions. So my key takeaways from her presentation was on the importance of, when you're looking to make a change, when there's already a city study happening, jumping onto that and aiming to shift outcomes in that study is a lot more effective than doing a study where there's not already attention from the city. And then also the other piece was that rather than the community spending several years to prepare a community plan, it's better to build one quickly and then have that plan clearly communicate expectations, desires regarding local development. And that's been her experience, just from the fact that oftentimes the city might not actually follow up and implement what was proposed by the community, right? So having great collaboration with the city is really important. If you're doing your own thing on your own without that collaboration with the city, then you can risk that really great plan being left on the desk. So if you're going to be doing things alone and you don't have that strong collaboration with the city, getting it done really quickly and then using it as a tool to engage with the city and developers. So those are some of my key takeaways. I'd love if folks can share with the room what were some of your key takeaways from Emily's presentation. See how I can. And if you have anything you can add, you can just jump in. I'm seeing chat. All right, good summary. Thank you. All right, I understand. Okay, so let's just jump into the next part then of my presentation before we have the lovely Amina do her piece. So, so today the tool that I'm sharing is, so we have here, all right, so I'm going to drop in the chat the community organizing guide. All right. Great. So, yeah, this is the main tool I'll be sharing today. This one is our community labor calculator. So this tool was talked about actually in our 2024 Impact and Next Steps report, but now we're making it public through this program. And so, you know, as I mentioned, one of the goals and objectives of the program is to raise awareness on the importance of community-led planning. And I know that many of you may be doing this on a voluntary basis and wanting to keep it voluntary. Some of you may be thinking, you know, this would be a great way to also have an impact, but also be able to, you know, pay my bills, right, and all that stuff. Because we're not all, you know, children of billionaires, I expect that to be the case at least. So in any case, so for that reason, right, you know, the community-led planning sector is really small, right? As I mentioned, you know, most planners are working in the private sector or some may be working in government. And so the number of folks who are in the nonprofit sector is really small. And so understand the impact and the value of our labor. This is how the calculator was made. You know, we work with a lot of really great people across Ontario who are doing great work voluntarily. And so, you know, whether you're doing this paid or unpaid, your work has the same value. And so the Canadian Institute of Planners has done a really great job of doing research on the compensation of planners, right? So you can really break it down into so many different types of costs. So in terms of if you're a development planner versus a parks planner versus a community development planner, we're able to actually get the data on all of those in terms of the average pay. And so the average pay for a entry-level role, according to the Canadian Institute of Planners in their 2023 income survey, membership survey, was $65,000. Medium authority role is $92,000, and other high authority roles is $158,000. So with this tool, you're able to, you know, understand, you know, who is your team who's working on the project, and, you know, someone who is, for example, just filling in surveys might be a low authority. Someone who's coming to a couple of workshops in the co-design process is a medium authority, whereas the person or the people who are making a lot of the core decisions and directing the project and the program and the team would be a high authority role, right? And so by putting together and filling in this information, you're able to actually create a clear picture on, the actual value of your labor, so that when you go to a funder, you're able to say, well, this is the actual value of all of the volunteer work that we've been doing. And then hopefully with that, you'll have some more support around being compensated for your work. And so I'm going to go through how this is filled in. So when you download this file, then you only fill in the cells that are orange. So don't touch anything else, right? We have here on column D an explanation of what's in columns A and B, right? So if you're like wanting to understand what these numbers mean, it explains here. And so, yeah, so, say for example, you have, a bunch of people who are, have a low level of engagement, right? And then you would have some people who are medium level engagement, and you only have 2 people who are doing the high level strategy work and directing the work on an ongoing basis. And you think about how many hours a week on average are they spending. And then you're able then to come to here, which is the sum of the low labor, the low authority, medium authority, and high authority labor. And then you have MERC. So MERC is like when you have payroll, we have all those other fees and taxes that you have to pay. So that's what that is, right? And then you have health benefits, right? If you want to be a nice employer and provide people with health benefits, put 5%. You can always put something different. And then, yes, this is that. And then you have that come together. And you have admin. So, you're going to need your accountant and legal and all that other fun stuff, right? That's around 10%. And you can always play with these numbers, right? If you want to say that, well, our admin's only 5% or so. And then you have your expenses. So if you're like, for example, you're renting an office or you're paying for material, so this is really very flexible. If you're saying, well, we're doing it completely grassroots and we don't want to have any material, we're doing everything for free in terms of expenses, you can put 0. It's always important to have a communications budget. People need to know what you're doing. So 10% is what we have here. And then at the end of that, it sums all these numbers together to get the total operational cost, right? And then you would put in here, what is the actual revenue? So how much are you actually making in terms of, via grants or subsidies otherwise? And then you would get as a result, the difference between actual value of your labor versus minus the operational value is the underpayment. This is a tool that can be useful in terms of in your process of building a community plan, as you estimate how much it may cost you to do the work, knowing that some of the work might actually be currently done by volunteers. And then we also have this here, which is our community organizing guide, collective impact guide to win affordable housing for your neighborhood. So we published this in March of last year. So it breaks down the key stages of the community planning into 5 stages. Yes, part of our roadmap project. Yeah, so it breaks into 5 stages. So stage 1 is creating awareness. So the objectives of the stage are to identify key stakeholders that work in and around housing or whatever topic. I'm sure this might be cross-applicable to other topics. Outreach to engage neighborhood residents, intervene effective strategies for identifying and agreeing on shared values. They have some activities and tactics listed here. And then stage 2, talk and understand and educate. So some objectives of this stage are to build relationships and trust with those you're looking to engage and to influence, conducting surveys to further clarify your goals, and also, what are the policy directions that you're wanting to take. Having a working group that's focused on the topic that can meet on an ongoing basis as a context shift or to implement the work and to check on the implementation of the work. The core activities are launching that group and recruiting members for that group. Stage 3 is regular meeting structures and subcommittees. So this is where, stage 1 and 2, you're a bit more informal, and 3, you're a bit more formal, where you have more clearly defined groups. So it might be around displacement solutions, land trust, or property owner engagement. Prioritizing goals around what to work on first, developing a more clear action plan with SMART goals. And number 4, neighborhood assets and resource mobilization. So this is around building more partnerships with other organizations. So you have a clear identity. By now you've developed a pretty clear identity in terms of who you are as a group. And so you can start to reach out to other groups around their collaboration with your group, and building a coalition. So greater awareness and public awareness. And then stage 5, this is where you're doing more aligned communications with key influencers in the space, in alignment with your project priorities. So that concludes in terms of the, so the question, so that concludes in terms of the last 2 tools for this session. So I have a quick question from Alyssa, and then we're going to throw it over to Amina for her presentation. Alyssa asks, are these values net or gross salaries? So I think you're meaning is it before or after tax? While Amina is presenting, I will look it up.
It looks like it's gross though, Cheryl, because you have your mercs included, you have admin included. It's gross. It's because of all those values. Yeah.
Alyssa, are you meaning for the calculator or for the values for the job, for the planning roles?
For the values. For the values, the hourly rate values that you were showing. And also the annual, I guess.
Yeah, maybe let's get into it when we go to the question and answers. I want to make sure I understand your question. We'll park that for afterwards. So I'm going to throw it to Amina to present. So thank you so much. Amina, I'll throw it to you if you can introduce yourself to the group.
I will. Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much, Cheryl. Before we get started, though, because it's such a small group, do folks mind telling me who they are? With the exception of Robert and Cheryl, I don't know if I know anybody else. And it would really help me calm my nerves a little bit. I get super nervous and I'll speak at the speed of light. So I apologize in advance for that. But it would be really great, just, even if you could just tell me your name and where you're joining us from would be great. So I'll start. I'm Amina Yassin Omar. I am the VP of Community and Placemaking for the Learning Enrichment Foundation. And tonight I'm joining you folks from Hamilton. Maybe 8-9 months ago, I moved out here to really stay rooted in a working class city. So, and I will pass it to my left, and it's Ahsan.
Hi, Amina. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us. And I will say, while I love Hamilton, Toronto's still the greatest city in the world. But yeah, I'm still in Toronto. I live in the downtown east area. I work with the Moss Park Coalition, with the Toronto Community Benefits Network. We do a lot of work in housing, employment, community safety, food justice, transit, you name it, we do it. And I'm familiar with Learning Enrichment Foundation. Actually, I used to work out of an office that the LEF had as well up in North York. So I had a chance to meet some of the staff there as well. So, thank you so much for taking the time to be with us here today. And yeah, I look forward to, chatting more and hearing about your experience and convincing you, hopefully, to come back to Toronto.
And then I will pass it to Alyssa.
Alisa, yes.
Alyssa.
Hi, Amina. Nice to meet you. I'm a transplant from Vancouver, and I've been in Toronto for 10 years now. I'm a marketer by trade, especially specializing in diversity and inclusion strategies. And 5 years ago, during the pandemic, my friends and I started a company, Mimo's Co-Living, that creates housing for the missing middle and the underserved populations. We've actually had some very interesting conversations with Burlington as well as Niagara Falls or Niagara Region Homelessness Task Force about bringing our co-living concept to those areas for workforce housing. So nice to meet you.
Likewise. And then it's Robert.
I'll just wave.
Robert's like, you see me enough, get out of my face. Fair. And I will explain our relationship in a bit. And then Azim.
So, hi, my name is Yassin. I'm a newcomer to Canada. Meanwhile, I'm looking for a job. I start volunteering with the City of Toronto as a neighborhood crime prevention champion. And I'm trying to actually reactivate privately owned public spaces and the lands transitioning between design and construction in downtown Toronto to be much more active and accessible for the community. So people in downtown Toronto actually start getting the sense of belonging to the city instead of rushing and passing by.
Wonderful. Thank you. And then Joy.
Hi. I'm Joy. I'm in Vancouver, but my work is based in Toronto. I work for Park People. I'm the project manager for Vancouver. And I'm very passionate about like the intersection between placemaking, community development, and sports. So yeah, I'm happy to
Nice
be
to
here.
meet you.
You too.
Michelle, please.
Sorry, just taking myself off mute, Amina. My name is Michelle Billick, and I'm residing in Mississauga. And a majority of my time is actually spent on volunteer initiatives. But what brought me to this table, obviously, is my interest in the process from being a local organizer and advocate, and supporter of displaced, marginalized, unhoused, and poor people experiencing food insecurity and various other intersectional issues. But also that process around the planning piece, right? How do I, what are some of the navigation tools that all of you folks around the table can provide? And I just wanted to let you know that we're actually launching the Peel Community Land Trust tomorrow at Regional Council.
Yay! Congratulations. That's amazing.
Well, we'll see where that goes. So. But I appreciate having the opportunity to sit on this conversation, and I'm grateful for you to be here too. Thank you.
Thank you so much, my friend. I appreciate that. Jason?
Oh, hi, I'm Jason. Mina, good to meet you. I came from Mississauga, residing in Streetsville. So from a local community of residents, and we have quite a lot of zoning change, different buildings and coming up, which is quite different the developing wise, and we're as a community group, as part of a representative, we want to understand and knowing how this zoning changing and usage the latest policy kind of stuff. Also, again, I have kids. If you grow up kids, and I kind of start worry how they're gonna afford a house. So that's one of a topic I'm interested as well. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Thank you. Good meeting you.
Thank you. And Benita?
Hello, good evening, Amina. Thank you for coming and sharing your time and expertise with us. We really appreciate it. I'm from an organization called House Canada. It's an acronym, stands for Housing Our University Students Equitably. So we build affordable nonprofit student housing, hoping to be national, but right now our furthest projects are in the GTA. And I'm here also with one of my colleagues who I'll let, I guess, go next. But yes, thank you for sharing with us today. Looking forward to it.
Very much, Benita. Appreciate that. And Jonathan?
Sorry to interrupt. My name is Boris. I'm actually Benita's colleague from House. I figured I'd also jump in now to introduce myself as well. Again, from the same organization. My focus is on research and policy. So conducting research about the state of housing, particularly when it comes to students, comparing that to some of the publicly accessible data, and then using that to develop policy recommendations for how we can improve the situation more broadly. But yeah, thank you again so much for coming out and talking to us.
Thank you. Thanks, Boris. Jonathan, and then Charlene, Kay, Shani, and Diane.
Hey, Amina, how's it going? Pleasure to meet you today. And my name is Jonathan Obai. I lead a youth-based community organization here in the city. Run a number of different programs and services for the community. And my background is in real estate. So a couple of years ago, sort of managed to try to bridge the two, and have now been initiating some efforts in the nonprofit housing development space, looking at how we can add to the affordable housing supply across the country. So aspiring real estate developer and community leader.
You love to hear it. Thank you.
Hi, Amina. My name is Charlene. It's lovely to meet you. I am a member of Miranet, which is the Mississauga Ratepayers Association network. And so we advocate on behalf of residents in Mississauga on issues that affect the entire city. So our job is mostly we're always reacting to bad decisions made either at the municipality or at the provincial level. So two of the issues, there's always something going on, but two of the really big issues that we're working on right now are stormwater issues. The city of Mississauga is one of the most flood prone in Ontario. And our city, in its infinite wisdom, drained a swamp and put housing on top of that swamp. And so we have a number of residents in one particular neighborhood, for example. Many people have been flooded like 4 or 5 times. And in this small neighborhood, they've paid out about 125 million just in damages every time they get flooded. And they're no longer insurable. So that's one issue we're working on. And the other big issue for us is that the region of Peel is underfunded by the provincial government to the tune of $868 million per year. And this has been going on for well over a decade. So that's another issue that we're hoping to address, working with our mayor. So, there's always bad decision making, so we're always busy.
Thank you, Shirley. That's funny.
Thanks.
Okay. Until Kay comes back. Shani, are you able to go?
Yeah, hi, I can go. Hi, Amina. My name is Shani. I am from Scarborough. I currently work as a law clerk, but I have, over the last few years, done a lot of work in public legal education for youth. So I am in the beginning stages of creating a community land trust that would create spaces for youth, because I feel like there aren't many spaces like that for them. And I think it's also contributing to, a lot of the trouble that a lot of them are getting into because they don't have spaces to be kids. So that's kind of, yeah, that's where I'm at right now. Thank you.
Thank you. And there you
Hello.
are.
Yes,
Hello.
how are you? Good evening. How are you?
Very good.
My name is Kay. I've been into community development. I run an organization in Oakville. We've been there. It's an integrated community development and media organization. We have a radio program on Shin Radio in Toronto, language program for like 11 years now.
Wow.
And now I'm in the area of Durham region, Bowmanville area that is developing. So I'm very much interested, not around the downtown area. We have so much vast land. People are moving seriously into this area. And you have all this virgin land and everywhere. And people are still going around homeless. And they don't have places. So I'm very much interested in affordable housing for minorities, racialized communities. Our organization's name itself is Visible Minority, which Canada has changed into racialized communities. So I'm very close to like people in the grassroots and then want to know, we know where the shoe pinches. So I'm very much interested in the development of affordable housing, especially looking at the vast land around here. Though I know I spoke with one of our mentors who says all the land is already acquired by the powerful ones. So we are just seeing empty land all over the place that they continue to develop. So that's one of my areas. What exactly? How do we resolve all this? Unlike our main office in Oakville, by the time you open your eyes, you are already in Mississauga. The other area, you are already in Milton. But here in Durham region, you travel between Oshawa to Curtis is about 25 minutes. From Bowmanville to Newcastle, see the distance you have to travel. But there's land there and people are moving because Toronto is bursting at the seams. Either people are moving towards London and stuff or moving towards here. So what are we going to do? That's my pain. That's one of
That's
the
what's
things.
pinching your toes. I hear you, sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kay, for introducing yourself. Last but not least, Diane, please, and then I will launch into my jibber jabber. You're on mute.
Thank you. My name's Diane Scott, and my background's in real estate. A lot of the things that kind of kept me up at night are all the potential clients that come my way that cannot get into housing. So I have, in recent months, somewhat gotten introduced to some projects that are on the go with my local church, Queen Street Presbyterian Church in Leslieville, and EHM. And that's probably a bit of the starting ground for myself as to, getting exposed to building affordable housing from the ground up, the actual development phase, et cetera. So I heard of this opportunity here through EHM, and I signed up. And unfortunately, I wasn't able to come to the dinner, but and meet some of the folks. But hey, I've gotten a lot of good information from this.
So happy to have you here. Thank you everyone for sharing and for introducing yourselves. I apologize to Cheryl, like my curiosity always wants to know who else is in the room, and then I know she has a schedule. So I'll try to be as quickly as I can. What I will do, so like I was gonna say, as folks are speaking, what I haven't heard is I am a developer who's here to make my billions and billions, as Cheryl was saying, and that's what I care about. Everyone here really cares about people and place and what are we doing to contribute to that? And I hope that my discussion with you tonight is really focusing on that and like around community organizing. I'll be speaking with you about the Mount Dennis for All Community Action Plan, which what we say is it is a plan to put people back into land use planning. I'm not a planner. I don't even pretend to be. Robert gets all of those questions all the time. What does this mean? Translate this into proper English. I don't know what this is. So, but I will explain a little bit about the organization and so on. So here we go. I'm so terrible at using Zoom, so apologies in advance. Oh my gosh. Wait, let me stop doing this. I played myself. There we go. No. Let's try this again. I don't know if I can see you while I do the presentation, but here we go. So we will, like I said, we did a quick introduction. Cheryl will keep me on track. I'll do a quick overview of LEF about the Mount Dennis community, just a quick overview. Mount Dennis for All, the process, and then there's some council directives, and then just to kind of go over where we are today. So the Learning Enrichment Foundation, for folks who don't know yet, is a community serving organization. We're a local charity that has been serving the Mount Dennis community for about, I'd say, just over 45 years. And we provide programs and services that enable individuals and families to contribute to their community's social and economic development. For a lot of people, they know us as a childcare provider. We operate 25 childcare centers across the city of Toronto. We also have community services by way of employment services, settlement services, language training. We do employment and employment training. And then about 5 years ago or so, we acquired 3 parcels of land on Weston and Somerville. So main intersection is Weston and Eglinton, to redevelop into a 14-story mixed-use project. So it's 175 affordable housing units, 30,000 square feet of community space, and some retail space for, we're envisioning social enterprises and community-led businesses. So that's who LEF is, and then and that's how Robert and I know each other. When his planning firm is leading the planning for the Mount Dennis quilt. Oh, what's going on? Why are you not moving? I don't know. It's not moving. Is it moving for you guys, or is it just me? You know what? I don't know what's going on.
Like, do you have a graphic that's supposed to be moving?
I don't know. I'm just gonna do it this way, guys. You're gonna have to get like the sort of the ghetto version of it, but here we go. Just a quick overview. Mount Dennis is a small community, I'd say about maybe 1.5 to 2 kilometers square. It's in the old city of York, in Ward 5. And Mount Dennis, like the big main intersection is, like I said, Eglinton and Weston. So, compare the city of Toronto, we have a higher proportion of visible minorities and immigrants, lower median income, and higher percentage of renters. And, community has been advocating for transit intensification for a while. We wanted better transit. We wanted more density. So, we have a transit expansion that's coming in. We have the LRT at Eglinton and Weston Road. It is slated to become a transit hub, meaning there's going to be GO Transit, the LRT, which is the TTC, and the Up Express. This connectivity and development interest led to us having the Picture Mount Dennis planning framework to create a vision for Mount Dennis. Our planning framework was done during a time of craziness. As you can remember, 2021 was not the best of times, and it was really difficult to do proper community consultation, especially coming onto in communities that are like Mount Dennis, that are have they're a lower income community. So that gave us a less than desirable secondary plan, which wasn't really, it really did a good job. I think even the Picture Mount Dennis, the planning framework did a good job of like identifying our needs, what the community's strengths were, like what it didn't really get done for us. And it's because there was, like I said, at a time when there wasn't very much community consultation done, give us opportunities for what it is that folks that live there, that work there, had envisioned for their own community. So back when I started at LEF in 2022, we're going along, chugging along, doing, here we are, a developer in a community organization, and thinking, wait, we're learning a lot. And like I said, I don't come from planning, and noticing that there's like time and again, people they're not making a guest appearance in any of these proposed frameworks and secondary plan, So again, I go to Robert and I say, Robert, how do we make this happen? So him and Sean and I, like Sean Gadden, for those folks who don't know, Google him. We kind of got together and thought about like what's missing and what people have done in the past. And I was really curious. And so what we wanted was a proactive plan that allowed us to have housing affordability and economic development and anti-displacement at the face of rapid gentrification. And what does this mean for community? So how do we put the people back in this process? So the Mount Dennis for All comes from that. The Mount Dennis for All Community Action Plan is a bold, first of its kind, community-driven 10-year action plan aimed to protect housing affordability and prevent displacement. We have, as a community, we had one central question: how can Mount Dennis remain inclusive, affordable, vibrant amid the pressures of development and growth? Which I think I've been hearing most of you kind of go after this evening. So we're not unique in that experience. And then we worked with our city councilor, Councilor Nunziata, to develop this plan, and the city's interdivisional working group. So Mount Dennis for All has there's a city interdivisional working group comprised of the Housing Secretariat, Transportation Services, Toronto Parks and Rec, Social Development, city planning. So it's a large group of people who have been contributing and informing this plan. And it's focused on expanding affordable housing. We wanted to do work around confronting anti-Black racism, advancing Indigenous reconciliation. We wanted inclusive economic opportunities, and protecting the natural environment. So how did we get here? So when I started, like I said, back in June 2022, we had this question: what do we do? So we hosted a community supper attended by over 227 individuals representing residents, agencies, clients, and the counselor. What we wanted to do was to focus on supporting the counselor in directing staff to start the development of the Mount Dennis for All plan, a people plan for complementing our secondary plan. And January and June of the following year, we hosted follow-up community suppers to set baseline for existing affordable housing and setting targets for the future, plus giving more direction on how to implement this vision. July 2022, the Toronto City Council provided additional direction for the Picture Mount Dennis study and approved the secondary plan. And then to that, directed staff to start working on the Mount Dennis for All Community Action Plan to go alongside the existing, I guess, stuff, city things. The directors create a cross-divisional working group, support the Learning Enrichment Foundation in co-hosting the Mount Dennis People Summit, and gave some like financial contribution to that. Provide an inventory of existing municipal services and assets in community. Develop an equity scorecard. Work with local community in achieving positive investments, report back, and develop a community plan and anti-displacement strategy to support the implementation of this vision. So we've been working for this since 2022 till today. And so where are we at now? As of April 2025, LEF and the city's housing secretariat, along with the interdivisional working group, we hosted the Mount Dennis People Summit, a community-led conversation covering 5 themes, namely housing affordability, inclusive local economies, public space and cultural environment, community safety and well-being, and transportation and mobility. And from that came a report produced by Untitled Planning. They were the company that we worked with to help us do the People Summit. And then from that day, we got 4 clear recommendations from community. Develop a community land trust. They wanted anti-displacement fund, establish community working group, and reclaim public spaces and run the Mount Dennis Community Center. This, sorry, I'll stop. This will be going to Community and Economic Development Committee on December 2nd, meaning the action plan, the recommendations, the how and what we're going to do around that, plus the report from the People's Summit, which is about a 40-page report, and then eventually developing this equity scorecard. I'm going to stop sharing because, like I said, this was a struggle to begin with. So, but yeah, I would love to hear, either what you've been doing in your own community, this kind of work, or if you have questions for me, and I will invite Robert as well, who's been in this. That's why he didn't even want to introduce himself. Like, I've been with you. What do you need from me? So this is where we are today. It is, like I said, a plan to put people back in the land use planning. Ta-da!
Amazing. Yay, thank you so much, Amina. If we were in person, we would all be hearing a thunderous applause.
Thank you, Cheryl.
I think your presentation was amazing, but I don't think what you guys have achieved is actually so incredible. So just wanted to emphasize for folks to understand, there was a secondary plan that was done, and then you were able to, in some ways, extend the exploration of the development by having the Mount Dennis for All plan, and then also you got, I think, was it 3 divisions, and you got multiple city teams.
7 divisions, yeah.
Yeah, the 7 divisions now collaborating with you guys on your plan. And then you had your dinners, but then also you had your People Summit, where the city actually provided funding. So there was a council motion to provide you guys with funding to host that summit. and then now and so the secondary plan, you're able to actually in that secondary plan to get statements around addressing displacement in that secondary plan, right? And now in the plan that's being produced that will be going to council in December, that is the community plan going to council, right? So
that's right.
That's really incredible, and I didn't know that you just started this in 2022. Like I was like, you must have been working on this for years before that. So
no, like I said, it was a conversation that led to, like I'm not kidding when I say, like I look at Robert and I say, our first meeting that him and I had together, it was me asking, why is like, so, you know, at the time, our building was about 19 stories and 132 units. And I was like, why can't it be 35 stories if it's an affordable housing project? And these feel like naive questions. And I take pride in my naivete in this space in many ways, because it is the opportunity to be curious and to learn. But from that comes like sparks, right? Well, how come there's no people? Like, who's making these plans and why are they planning this way? Like, why is so much density coming in with no parking? What happens to the people that live here today? Like, where's the affordability? Where does it go? Right? So no Section 37. We're not inclusionary. We don't have inclusionary zoning. So the mechanisms that would support affordability don't exist for Mount Dennis. So it's just the questions of like, wait, what's going on? What's happening? And like I said, and having the opportunity to engage, I'm really proud to have Gladkey as our partners in this, because I don't know how much I would know without Robert being like, no, this is what, like, these are the policies that guide that. This is, because if it was up to me, I'd be like, forget tenure, let's do this and let's do that and get wild. So it's always helpful to have that sounding board and knowledge as a partner, both on our housing development, but also in the people part of the planning.
Something I'd say to that is, and I think something that helped is, in engagements usually with the city, you think, the city must have the authority to get the things done that the community is talking about. And a huge deficiency that planning usually brings is it's one division, and it's one division that doesn't spend any money ever. The only thing it does is it creates a framework that allows investors to spend their money. So when communities come forward and they start talking about, well, we're talking about density. What about a daycare? What are we talking about in terms of schools? Can we get a crosswalk? Will I be able to afford to live here? Those are other divisions of the city or other things entirely. And they're not related in any way to the people that you're talking to in planning. And there's no planning tools that can compel anyone to do anything. And so the thing that Amina was asking for, like, very much asking unreasonable questions. But the purpose being they're unreasonable because sort of the way that we go about planning and organize, like that is unreasonable. It makes no sense that we're going to talk about, in the case of Mount Dennis, over doubling the population, and we can't talk about expanding social services at the same time, or talk about anti-displacement at the same time. So, yep. Great conversations, like being pushed in a lot of ways. But like that's this whole process and framework, which I think, from my experience as a land use planner, is something I've never seen before, and something that I think is like really transformative in terms of it's the development of an entirely new tool. So yeah, it sort of comes from asking unreasonable questions.
That's Robert's nice way.
Amazing. Yeah.
Be unreasonable.
Yeah. Yeah, I was gonna say, like, be unreasonable, I guess, and also ambitious, as you noted, right? Like, don't kind of what's the word for it? Like, don't count yourself out or limit yourself. Really being ambitious and reasonable. Any questions now for Amina and or Robert around this project or the work? Oh, Elsa, yeah.
I just want to say that was a really good example Oh, sorry, Yassin. Where are you going to go next? That was a really good example of what happens when somebody from the community who is not in planning or zoning or whatever, and what can happen. Because we are the ones living in this area, and we're watching out for people who have been living in the area and future forward will be living in the area. So that was really helpful for me to understand what is the benefit of community-led planning. Thank you for that.
Thank you, Elisa. That's really wonderful.
Hi.
Yassin?
Sorry, yes, I had a quick question. But first, I just wanted to say thank you so much for sharing that. It was amazing to hear all the incredible work that is going on in Mount Dennis. Definitely, one of my favorite neighborhoods in Toronto. I've been a couple times.
Hey, we love to
So,
hear it.
and yeah, I think it was real great how you managed to get a whole bunch of the city's agencies and then a whole bunch of like other community organizations at the table to kind of hash these things out together. I guess my only kind of key question is, and this kind of touches upon what Cheryl was mentioning earlier with the tool, is did you have any trouble, I guess, kind of making the financial aspect of this kind of project work? Because a lot of the times in like nonprofit or like community oriented work, it can be difficult to get like all the necessary funding for this kind of work, as opposed to like a private developer coming in who has the means to be able to like build a massive condo building or what have you. And there is often like a mismatch in like that kind of level of resources that are available. So I'm interested to hear like such an incredibly successful project. Like, did you have any trouble, I guess, like making that part of this kind of project work, like from an economic lens?
Like, if you mean, like, do you mean our housing project or the Community for All like the action plan? Those are two kind of different things. So we have like an affordable housing project that's coming up in community. But what I will say about community organizing and even developing the Mount Dennis Community for All action plan, that's the privilege of working at an organization that's as large as LEF is and has the capacity to do that. Because the first 3 community suppers, right, us hosting it, this is hundreds of people. Like, that means time of people. We had to invest like, food, facilities, all kinds of things. But as Robert really mentioned earlier, I can be a very unreasonable person when it comes to like, how do we recenter people? So, it was like from our conversations that then I go back to our executive director and say, hey, like, we're a developer. And it was such a stunning feeling for me the first time somebody called me that. I was like, who are you talking to? I work for a charity. What are you talking about? But they're like, dude, you're a developer who's developing right next to my house. Point taken, right? But it was like, we wanted to produce something that allowed us to do like what we needed to do. So the privilege of working for a large organization is you can absorb those costs in the front end until we got to the People's Summit, right? And we wanted to do this report back. And then we like, slowly we worked with our city councilor. This is lock and step with her, because without her and city council support and committee support, this doesn't move at all, right? So we hosted our first initial plan, gave her the support. 227 people like constituents sat in front of her, said, we want you to go get this for us. Then she goes to the council and we get a bunch of stuff approved. Then we come back to new direction. So like, it was us working like that until sort of maybe it was, I don't know if, Robert, do you remember when it was like earlier this year when we were deputing for for the action plan with the resources to come forward? I think it might have been,
Or exactly a year ago, I think. It
yeah.
went to Economic Development Committee, November 24. Yeah.
So, and then it's just us saying, hey, this is what we want, and then putting it forward as such. And we want to be precedent setting. Like, I think that these things exist and we push it through the way we do, working with our counselor and like, slowly grinding over 3 years, because it takes that kind of patience, and we know those of us that are in people organizing and people movement, like we recognize not everybody moves at the same speed as bureaucracy, and sometimes those of us that have the opportunity and the privilege to understand bureaucracy and how it moves, we can bridge that a bit, like that conversation, and then be like, LEF continuously recenters the organization as a whole functions that way, like centering its people, listening. We don't, even in our development, and Robert can attest to this with me, like we've asked, the first conversation we had with community was around streetscape. Because we're like, just by virtue of living in an affordable building, you shouldn't have to live in some ugly box. That's not fair. We want a building that makes sense with the rest of it, the community that is experiencing this level of density and gentrification. And we don't want a building that is, hey, that's the building where the poor people live. We want to look like everybody else and blend into our community well. So streetscape was really important. We had how many meetings? We're having one about it tomorrow night. We're at site plan, right? Like it is constantly like hearing people doing what they had asked us to do and then coming back to confirm. Are we still on track? Are we still doing the thing that you requested us to do? And this action plan is no different. It is constantly like working with community, hearing, then going back to our counselor and saying, this is what we heard, and then refining, going back and saying, this is how we refine, going back. It's a lot of back and forth, but it's worth it. So, one of the things that I have been pushing for is like, after we go to committee in December, if this thing passes, how can, like, we need to set a roadmap for other communities to be able to do this kind of work proactively, especially in transit-oriented communities.
Thank you so much for that. That's incredibly useful information. And I will definitely say it sounds like it's been grueling work. So big shout out to you guys for, putting all that time in. And definitely, I think you've been a great example, like as a roadmap of, what other communities can kind of learn from and, adapt those strategies in different neighborhoods throughout Toronto. So appreciate it.
Absolutely. Our pleasure. And speaking of making folks uncomfortable, like our plan, usually communities like social and economic development plans live with social planning. That's the division that leads it. Ours is being led by the housing secretariat because that's where affordable housing lives. So they are super uncomfortable the whole time because this is not their usual orientation, and neither is like, city planning. And so bringing this interdivisional working group together and making people like think broader and think of this as an opportunity that, like, for the things that you always wanted to do, you never got to do if you work with within the city. And if you're in a community that, like, you stick to what you wanted.
To that end as well, I think was it the first staff report that came out that was largely in favor of advancing this thing. It wasn't structured perfectly, and you guys threatened to depute against it. And this
it's true.
Yeah, and so like there's another use of being completely unreasonable, but if it's not going to work, and it's not going to work with your community, there's no point in it advancing, and so you obviously have the power. Amina convened 230 people who had, like, that was the impetus for the plan happening in the first place. And so if they are not happy, then what is the point of going forward with like a watered down process? So there are many points along the process that what is a community-led sort of vision will be reinterpreted as a bureaucratic exercise where you need to re-emphasize that this is not what we've done before, and it needs to, that vision needs to be refreshed.
Thank you, Robert. Alisa.
So I'm curious if you can. Oh, there's a hand. Great, Alyssa, go.
Okay.
I can leave my question for.
Thank you for that explanation, Amina, in terms of that, and Robert, in terms of that there's many divisions and maybe divisions that aren't normally at the table, that you had to pull into play to get your project or your request, your unreasonable requests met. I'm wondering from a planner's perspective at the city level, now that they have seen your template and your action plan and the roadmap moving forward, why is this not shared with other projects or other areas? I don't get it how they don't now incorporate that this is the process moving forward.
Wouldn't that be beautiful? You know, once it goes, like, I feel like once it goes through council and other communities start to see it and they start to organize around it, this might become the norm. I don't know. We are hopeful, right? I think that that's the only thing we can do is put forward a hopeful plan that says, hey, if folks want this, this is available to you too. But it's just, I don't know why it's not a normal part of operations. I think it kind of goes back to what Robert said. It's just, it seems unreasonable. Like, what is this? You know, it's not planning, like that's not their job per se, but it should be. Like, you can't talk. I'll give a quick anecdote and I'll shut up. There is a street, there's Truthui Drive. I don't know if folks know it. It is one of my least favorite, very short streets. Why? Because it is so conducive to community violence. There's so much community violence that happens there, even though there's a police station there. And my assumption is, it's just bad design. It is just the way the whole community is designed is not good. It is, those streets are too wide, the things are hidden, it's too dark in places, people can't cross properly. It's just design. So, you know, for us, we get a lot of like communities and people who live there who experience real life stuff, right? Like, it's frustrating, the buses aren't working, why don't we have this, da, da, da. And then you get all those things and you still get bad design and like this ghettoization of your community in a different way. And now you don't get any of the benefits because, well, you're out of luck. So what we're saying is, forget that. Let's go. Like, we can make this happen and then make folks feel really uncomfortable, but that's up to us. It's up to the people to choose and say, let's go. We want a community action plan too. And just as a, you know, addendum for me right now is, Robert, you know, I was talking, oh, look at that cute. I'm sorry. That's such a cute baby. My goodness. Oh my goodness. But yeah, like, so the Gladkey's doing the planning study, right, for Weston and Lawrence, and which will, I'm assuming, will trigger a secondary plan there. Hopefully.
There'll be a policy update. They're trying to not call it a secondary plan, but regardless, yes, something is happening.
So, but we've had this experience together in Mount Dennis, right? And it's not like he can stop being who he is and become somebody else. But that's a question that I get often asked. Like, how come this is only happening in Mount Dennis? Why doesn't Weston get it? Which I reply, because it never existed. It's not really, it's just, it's chapter one. It's chapter one. And then, like, you know, how other chapters are written in this book is up to us. But this is, you know, we want it to be replicable. We want it to become part of business, like operations, the way, like the work that Cheryl's doing in CP planning is exactly that, is reorienting very uncomfortable spaces. So.
Thank you.
Yeah, to add, like, you know, this is, I think, the great work that Amina and Robert and the great folks at LEF are doing are another example of community leading and shaping the planning process. So, you know, LEF we've learned about today, Parkdale we've talked about, but also Jane Finch is also doing really incredible work that's also helping to shape the way that planning is done. Jane and Finch was, I think, the first neighborhood where a community development plan was used as part of the planning process. So usually you have your secondary plan, which is led by the city planning office. And then because of the context of Jane Finch, where there's higher levels of displacement and there's a lot of active also community organizing. I really need to emphasize that because it doesn't just happen that the city decides to do good stuff. Oftentimes there's also a grassroots community component to it. So in that context, we had really amazing leaders in Jane Finch. And through that, the city decided to really engage their social development office. And so the social development office is looking at social development, including economic development and displacement and arts and culture and all the different types of things. And so it's meant to work now in parallel with the goals of the secondary plan. Now you also have this cross-sectoral, cross-disciplinary plan that engages also the United Way as a strong partner. And is now also investing in, well, now we have this plan around housing and businesses and arts and culture and green space, and there's ongoing investment in terms of, they're going to be launching a ongoing community group to provide feedback on the implementation of the plan in Jane Finch. And actually a lot of the city staff in Jane Finch is a part of, I think, work in Mount Dennis and other neighborhoods, and also this community development plan concept, which is bringing in social development to run parallel to the city planning process, which is typically about built form, more so than other aspects, is taking place in other parts of the city. So, for example, there is a community development plan now in Downsview Park, and also a community development plan in and the Shoreburn neighborhood. I forget the name of the neighborhood, but Shoreburn, where you have a lot of like homelessness and precarious housing. There's a community development plan happening there alongside the secondary plan process. And so, yeah, I'm going to mention like one of the big goals of city planning is to help to normalize that, because it shouldn't just be neighborhoods that are in the greatest dire situations that are getting community development plans, and this kind of cross-sectoral collaboration. There's needs for support and for all neighborhoods, and also it shouldn't just be neighborhoods where you have kind of existing leadership to come and push for these outcomes, right? So how do we actually build that local leadership and support to exist in all neighborhoods? That's actually going to be a big part of what we're working on next year, and is the community-led campaign is a part of raising awareness around that as well. Are there any other questions or maybe comments? Robert, you're going to say something?
I was maybe going to add into your response to Alyssa's question there around why, and Amina's response around why we are not seeing it replicated more. That one is around the action plan for Mount Dennis specifically. I think that is pulling in a lot of different people. Like, it is very new. And so even I don't know what will be in the December report, and I'm very excited to read it. And then around the community development plans, a lot of what's in them has no status or force from a planning perspective. And so planning under the Planning Act is required to update policy. And so the reason why planning shows up at all is because there's a law that says that we have to. There's no law that says any other city division needs to be in your community. And so it is just more expensive and more complicated to bring other parts of the city there. There are citywide strategies, there are a lot of citywide strategies that commit to getting certain things done by a certain point in time. A lot of those strategies are not localized to neighborhoods. It makes logical sense that they should be, but it involves getting people who usually sit at City Hall to like come down to a community at like 6 or 7 o'clock and sort of sit in front of people and talk to them. Being a planner who currently is going through a area study process, I would say probably a lot of planners would like this type of tool. We sit in front of a lot of people on the private and public sector who ask for things and talk about things that we have no power to do anything about. And so a lot of the planning system, it's either going to be implemented by choice by a developer who wants to either do something to market other projects in their community, or like not. And we need to develop new tools. So the reason why anything's happening in Mount Dennis also is because the community came out, the community compelled the counselor, or the counselor led. You can view those things as being two sides of the same coin. Leadership is usually coerced by by someone.
Encouraged.
Encouraged. And so, so you get things that are more difficult than the status quo done by having that type of advocacy. And then the more they're done, the more they hopefully seem like just good ideas. So I'm very hopeful.
Keep your eye out for us for December 2nd.
Oh, there's one other thing. The province currently has a proposal. They're seeking feedback. They're proposing changes to official plans. And among the changes is the elimination of what the secondary plan is. A secondary plan, like from my perspective, is the only time planning is going to show up in your community. It's the only time. So, and not with like one specific development on the table, but talking about the community as a whole. So if anyone around here, it's a technical thing, it's very complicated. The province is likely to get very little feedback from community organizations. They're going to get a lot from developers who don't like long official plans. So I'm going to drop the link to the environmental registry notice. They're taking feedback until November 22nd. Should you feel like you want to provide any comments, you can.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think maybe we'll emphasize how that plays into what we're talking about. One of the wins I mentioned that Amina won and her community and Learning Foundation was including addressing displacement as a policy line item in their secondary plan, right? So if secondary plans aren't a thing, then that might not be enforceable, right? Another kind of thing that we're looking to do in their efforts around displacement, you might not actually have the policy tools and lever to compel a developer to comply with a city's desires around addressing displacement or improving economic well-being for their neighborhoods. It's quite akin to Arella's case, where Arella made a lot of wins in the border neighborhood, but a lot of the strategies that she used back then may not actually be applicable because of the context of the policy changes that have been made by the province since that time, right? So I think in that case, providing feedback but also underscoring the importance around, when Amina introduced her work, she described it as community organizing, right? So it's really about building momentum and building buy-in across a diversity of players. And yeah, being really ambitious in your ask. So I just wanted to leave that with folks. And as we consider and understand the context here with regard to policy in Ontario.
Before we go, I want to tell Elisa and Joy that I grew up in Victoria, BC, and so I'm really happy to see West Coast people here. The end. Now I can shut up.
Yeah, no, I haven't been to the West Coast, so I look forward to seeing what all the hubbub is about. Yes. The mountain. I heard the mountain's nice. Yeah. All right, so I think today is mostly mentors and such. So we can leave it for maybe if folks have maybe a question. I have one last question for you, Amina, and then we can close off. So I'm going to give folks one last opportunity for a question, and I'm going to throw my question in. Yassin?
Yeah, I just really quickly wanted to say, it's really great to hear that they've got a community development plan happening in Downsview. I think I heard about that, but I haven't heard too much details. For the Sherbourne, for the Dundas Sherbourne area, the community action plan that we have here, I wanted to touch upon something that Robert mentioned earlier, in terms of like how a lot of community development plans like don't really have that much like status or force from a planning perspective. I think that's very interesting, and I think that definitely like for these kinds of ideas around like social community planning, I think that there's definitely like maybe space there to think about like how maybe it can be more formalized. Just because like I feel like a lot of these ideas are very, very new. And to give an anecdote, like similar to what you dealt with the housing secretariat, I was in a meeting with Metrolinx and we were trying to get a community benefits framework built in place for the Ontario line, and their team just admitted that they don't really have much experience in this area, and they're trying to like implement like this.
They don't care.
Yeah, yeah.
Those people don't care.
Exactly. And I think it's a lot of like you're trying to like get people who are like in transit or like in these other areas to care about like, and you're trying to like get people down from like city hall or like from the provincial level into the community. And I feel like there's like space there to think about like how can we possibly like kind of more formalize those processes of like ensuring that when development from a municipal or provincial level or even from a private perspective is like happening in a community, like there's like kind of that more cross-sectoral engagement because it does seem like very siloed, as in like, the housing secretariat does their part and then the social development office does their part and so on and so forth. The only thing I wanted to ask, and this might be a question more specifically for Amina. So you have some familiarity with like a few different neighborhoods, and I think that it would be great to kind of replicate the success that's happened in Mount Dennis. But I think the key thing that I'm kind of seeing is like, Parkdale was managed to like do a lot of incredible things. Regent Park managed to do a lot of incredible things. Dennis, Jane Finch, and there's like similarities there. But I'm interested to kind of see like how those solutions were heterogeneous depending on the makeup of those communities because there's like differences in all those cases of all those case studies. So I guess kind of like what did you feel was kind of like unique to the Mount Dennis
About
area
Mount
that you
Dennis?
didn't really see anywhere else? Yeah.
Well, for us, it was the opportunity was in two. So our secondary plan was still like in flux when we started doing this work. So we got in like very proactively. Usually what happens is intensification starts to happen, a secondary plan is enacted, people are going for their and then communities like, holy crap, we're about to get displaced, we're about to get kicked out. Like we start to play catch up. And that memory stays with me. Like I've had the opportunity to work in Regent Park. I've had the opportunity to work in Alexandra Park and all over, like in not Jane and Finch, sorry, in Rexdale. So I was like, what happens is we're always playing catch up and we always kind of go after the same things. And it's because land use is such an opaque space. I had like it was for me to understand and then to like when I'm not kidding, Robert, what does this mean? What's a secondary plan? Is there a primary plan? I remember asking that question. What is what is the secondary to? No, there's an official plan. So like doing some of that investigation and then being able to translate to community. There's a big plan, then there's this a little baby plan within that plan, and this little plan impacts your life in all the ways that matter, from how you walk to how you get to work to where you eat to everything. So how do we be proactive while this thing is in flux? Right? Like our second, like Weston right now is a good community for that. There's a policy update coming, like it's proactive. It's really good proactive tool. And then city kind of goes along because the bureaucracy is beholden to council, and councilors are people that got elected by people, and then they're beholden to the people. So how do we do this? You just let the people know, hey guys, you didn't say no to density, you said yes to transit expansion, but you're being screwed out of a lot of things because this is not the community that you want. And by the time you enjoy any fruits of your labor, of all the nights, you saw Cheryl give us a tool of how much it costs to be at these meetings, right? And so all of that effort for you never to see an ounce of what you get back. So how do we do that? And how do you organize saying, hey, you are person one, you go to you 200 and some odd number of you ask your counselor to do something in a community that's like 10,000 people, they're going to show up and they're going to be part of this thing because you have to hold people's like be unreasonable. It's okay to be unreasonable. And as long as you have the right allies that speak the right language with you and then who can translate some of that what feels inaccessible back to you. I think that was, and it still continues to be, the most important part. If I can't tell the story of Mount Dennis to a young person, to a person who English isn't their first language, what a secondary plan is, then you're not of this, that doesn't make sense. It'll come back to us. And we're people too. And I don't know the like of a person who has mobility issues, a person who's pushing a stroller. I don't know that experience. I can speak to it, I can see, extrapolate, but it's better to come from them. So I think that has been for us like the opportunity to be proactive, because our secondary plans still like those didn't happen yet. We just got in the nick of time. Just in the nick of time. And then council directed, okay, if you're going to do this, you need to do this beside it now. And so what are they going to say? And like, we want it in such a way that if it didn't come out as the way we had been directed by our constituents, our people, we're not going to stand behind it. And the first iteration of it was rubbish. They came back, city does what it do, right? They came back with a bunch of jibber jabber that I was like, I don't know what this is, and I know I don't like it. This is not what the people asked. So, that's just my one advice is like, start organizing your people.
Thank you very much. That's incredibly useful advice. I think that goes for a lot of things. Yeah, in those areas.
And Asad, if anybody here is interested in following up and wanting to have a sort of a more understanding of what this is and how we got here, I know maybe we are 15 minutes over, but I will say I'm available. We can set up time to chat for sure.
Great. I will share your contact with the folks who can connect with you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okie dokie. All right. Well, yeah, so thank you so much, Amina. I'll give another applause, and our unofficial second special guest again, Robert. Woohoo, Robert.
Yes!
and little Emma.
Yes!
Yeah, it was really illuminating to hear about your work. Like, I didn't know that this all started in 2022. I think it really speaks to the impact of, I think the key word today is being unreasonable, right? We live in a pretty unreasonable world. And so if it could be unreasonable in that way, like, why can't it be unreasonable in the way that we want to see it, right? So yeah, just having this kind of voice in your head, I can do it, I can do it, I can do it. I know that's, when I started my work at Speed Planning, I actually had my screensaver was a picture of Grapefruit Rapids going, we can do it. Whenever I open the computer, it's like, yeah, I can do it. And that's what got me through. So just, having that in your mind that, yes, this is possible, and just keep pushing. And yeah, anything can happen from there. So thank you, everybody, for joining. This is our last from the ground up session. And we will be having a survey that will be going out to folks just to learn more about